Greetings, my name is Brian Allman. My pronouns are he and him, and I am the new Director of Education and Community Engagement for Geffen Playhouse. It is my honor to be here with you today to participate in a strong partnership with the veteran community by celebrating their cultural identities. It's an honor to have you all here joining us. I'm going to start off by sharing a video. So if you will indulge me while I share my screen.
Hi, I'm BJ Lange. I'm a proud United States Air Force veteran, and I had the honor of being a fellow teaching artist for the Geffen Playhouse's Summer 2022 Veterans Virtual Monologue Writing and Performance Workshop. First of all, I'd like to say I'm sorry for not being here live. I desperately wanted to be here, but if you're watching this, then that means I'm representing the United States Air Force as the social media correspondent for the Department of Defense's Warrior Games on ESPN, which means I'm pre-recording this video in the middle of the San Fernando Valley in 100-degree heat. I'd like to say thank you to the Geffen Playhouse for the opportunity to be a part of this much-needed theater-making experience. The ability to be able to collaborate with such fantastic groups of caring artists means so much to me. To my brothers and sisters, my fellow veterans, I'm so proud of all of your hard work this summer. Thank you for opening yourselves up and for allowing yourself to become vulnerable. The amount of growth that I saw this summer, both professionally and certainly personally, are food for my soul. I firmly believe that the arts can heal in so many different ways. I know I did a lot of reflection and reminiscing while I was creating my monologue, and I hope that you enjoyed the same during your process. It was an honor to be able to share this experience with all of you, and I know that my Saturday mornings are going to be pretty boring from now on, so hit me up from time to time. I look forward to seeing all of your work on this stage now and in the future. Briefly, I'd like to acknowledge my fellow teaching artist, Sean Michael. Thank you for your amazing sense of humor, and Brian, thank you for your trust in me. It was a huge mistake. Thank you also for your leadership. We could not have done it without the both of you, civilians. On behalf of all of the veterans, we thank you both immensely. And before I go, to all of you that are watching out there, thank you from the bottom of my heart for supporting these veterans who have spent the past 10 weeks developing these pieces of art. I truly hope that you'll enjoy this presentation.
Before we continue, I would like to share a land acknowledgement. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the ancestral lands which we each call home. Specifically the traditional and unceded land of the Tongva, Gabrielina, and Chumash. As we are present to these indigenous communities, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations, we reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local indigenous communities and cultures. For more information about the lands you reside on, please visit www.native-land.ca or text your city and state at 1-855-917-5263. As here we are in the Education and Community Engagement Department, it is a great honor that we are sharing with you our second virtual Veterans Writing and Performance Workshop. Because of the subsequent pandemic and lockdown, we had to move this program virtually. So for the last 2 seasons, we have been working on Zoom during the summer from June till August, working with veterans from all various branches on developing their own cultural identity monologues. The hope is to return to in-person presentations next season, as we did previously in our 4 earlier seasons. Historically, the Vets Workshop, previously in person, now virtual, but this is the first year that we have brought in a mental health expert, Dr. Constance Scharff, Ph.D. Dr. Constance Scharff is founder of the Institute for Complementary and Indigenous Mental Health Research. She has been an incredible addition to this project, and we cannot thank her enough. Luckily, and also coincidentally, she will also be sharing a cultural identity monologue later in the performance. Now, I want to remind everybody in the audience to please remember to keep your mute on. We also ask that you keep your videos turned off until the very end. And I want everyone to know, and this has been a guiding factor in all 10 weeks of our workshop, is we consider this virtual room a safe space and a brave space. Now, you may have heard those phrases before and you may not understand, and I'm happy to explain. This virtual safe space is a place intended free of any type of bias, conflict, criticism, judgments, or threats. Likewise, this is a brave space. We would remind our participants that there are no wrong answers, to be brave, to share your ideas, your thoughts, and your voice. And that's exactly what they did. And today we are happy to share with you a number of their cultural identity monologues. It is now my pleasure to introduce the MC and my co-facilitator for the workshop. He's also a Geffen Playhouse teaching artist. Please welcome Sean Michael Boozer.
Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you, Brian. I am Sean Michael Boozer. I'm a writer, director, improviser. You might know me from The Dropout. A lot of people say I'm the reason the Dropout was up for an Emmy. I don't think that was the Hollywood Reporter or Deadline. I think it might have been my mom. But point taken is I'm a very successful actor. So I had the absolute pleasure of working with these veterans who dug deep and did some work that I am so proud of. I am so proud of each and every one of these people, and you will see why. We asked all of our veterans to participate in our monologue by identifying an object that says something about them, that reflects their cultural identity. Everyday objects, or just these things that should be everyday objects but have incredible meaning to each of these people as individuals. So today we have 12 veterans presenting monologues based on an important object to them, something that represents their cultural identity. Our first monologist is Lester Probst, a Korean War U.S. Army infantry veteran.
I believe my cultural identity originates from growing up among my family members who were part of the greatest generation. We all know that the greatest generation won victory in World War II. But did you know that they reversed the flow of the Chicago River to stop the city of Chicago from being a swamp and created the Panama Canal? Another accomplishment was the building of the first paved highway, the Lincoln Highway, from New York City to San Francisco. I personally relate to that Lincoln Highway because of the Kodak prints that you now see on the screen that were taken in 1925 by my Uncle Jim. For many years, they have been mounted on one page of my godmother's photo album, and together they capture my mom and my dad with his family having a picnic in a small wooded area alongside that same roadway. I see how they are all dressed in their 1920s period clothing, and I am amazed how adventurous they were to embark on that long road trip from New York City to Seattle and back in that newly invented horseless carriage. And I asked myself, did they own that car? How could they have afforded a Packard touring car? My father was born around 1900 on the Lower East Side of New York City. When he was 12 years old, his father died suddenly, and he had to leave school to take over the business. Then only a few years later, when he was 16, his life was interrupted by the First World War, and he enlisted and served in the Coast Artillery in Seattle, Washington, until he was discharged in 1918. My dad stayed in Seattle for the next several years, working in various jobs, such as sheet metal apprentice and shorthand stenographer, and taught himself how to play the saxophone. He returned to New York City and worked as a salesman for various companies and formed his own dance band where he met my mother on a dance floor. My mom was the daughter of Polish, Russian, Jewish parents and worked as a bookkeeper in Manhattan. Pictures from this road trip capture my mom, my godmother, Aunt Frances, holding a bird cage with a pet canary inside, name unknown, and a German Shepherd puppy named Monty. My Aunt Frances was a kind and gentle soul, so I gathered that the canary was with them because it would have died if left at home. Then there was the puppy Monty. When I was a baby in the Bronx living near Yankee Stadium, my mom would leave me downstairs alone in my carriage. Monty would be lying under it so that she could go about her business, knowing that my protector would keep me safe and that I would still be there when she returned. However, Monty wasn't always so protective. When my family was traveling on that Lincoln Highway and camping under the stars each night, they were robbed. The thieves were so silent that no one heard them, and then only discovered the next morning that items were missing. It's hard to believe that my fearless protector slept through that robbery. After returning from Korea in 1954, I got a degree in electrical engineering from NYU, and for over 40 years, I worked in the computer industry until I retired in 2002 and waited for my wife to retire. And when she did in 2004, and because one of our daughters lived in Beverly Hills with two of our grandkids, we sold our house, packed our little two-door Audi with suitcases, two cats, their carriers, and one large litter box. We took off on our own version of that Lincoln Highway adventure made so long ago by my parents. For roughly 7 days, we followed the biscuit and gravy route to Southern California, not in such a grand and large car as my folks had, but one that was much faster. We were also older than they were and had to deal with our own crowded car and the danger of two cats roaming between our legs, under our feet at speeds exceeding 80 miles per hour. That trip was definitely far more daunting and unpredictable than having a young German puppy and a canary in a cage. All four of us arrived safe and sound in Los Angeles, settled into the Hollywood scene, where several years later I joined the American Legion, Hollywood Post 43, and co-wrote a 2-act play about PTSD and my own play, Volunteers, about women in the military. Thank you.
Thank you, Lester. Please share some love and support for this Korean War vet in the chat box. Our pictures, those pictures that were up or were brought to us by Joshua Lange, who will be presenting a little bit later. One of the great things about this group is they are so supportive of each other. If someone had an issue or was confused about something, one of the other people would be like, oh, I've got that. This was the most supportive group I've worked with in I don't know how long. They were such a great group to work with, and they were so supportive of each other. It was amazing. So yeah, I share those good comments in the chat box. Our next monologue comes from Kimberly Morrow, a veteran of the U.S. Coast Guard.
Hello, everyone. The rebellious stepchild here. You know, the youngest of 14 and a Coast Guard veteran. Hilarious, I think. Well, not all the time, but I have a very interesting story to share. It's about my very exciting and amazing life. In case you are wondering what makes it exciting and amazing, thank you for pondering the question. Well, it hasn't always been exciting and amazing, especially when I was a child, because me and my siblings, we had a very serious drug problem. Yes. Oh, yeah. We were drugged to church every Sunday and sometimes during the week. And the only way out of it was death. Either way, we were still going to end up at the church. So you see this beautiful cross. It's a representation of my faith that brings me sheer delight and unspeakable joy because of my personal, intimate love relationship with my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And for me, it's incomparable to any other. Yes, I do have other crosses. This is very significant because of where I bought it. Well, we all know my favorite singer, the late, great Whitney Houston, who was also raised up in the church and was a gospel singer. My favorite song of Whitney, and it may be yours as well, is I Will Always Love You, and which reminds me of my love relationship with Jesus. Well, Whitney's sister-in-law, Pat Houston, and I were born and raised in Cleveland County, North Carolina. And Pat has a consignment shop about a 5-minute walk where I grew up in uptown Shelby, North Carolina. I no longer live there, but the same year of Whitney's unfortunate death in 2012, I was going to Pat's annual teen summit that Friday night where they honored Whitney. But before attending Pat's teen summit, a friend and I went to Pat's consignment shop. And it was then and there I found this priceless treasure. Yes, I brought other items as well, but this cross, and when I wear it, I get so many compliments. And it's also a lead-in and an opportunity to share where I purchased this beautiful cross. You know, I don't always wear it, but when I do wear it, like to church, I still go to church, the opera, and many other events. So I am so happy and grateful for the opportunity to share my story about this beautiful cross with you and so many others. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. All of my presenters, make sure you go back and read the chat that have been going on. There's so many good things being said about you guys as you are presenting. So our third monologist, and monologist is just a fancy term for someone reading their monologue. Our third monologist deployed in the Iraq Invasion in 2003 and Afghanistan in 2005. He's a U.S. Army Air Calvary Apache helicopter crew chief. We're proud to welcome Joshua Lange.
Thank you, everybody. I believe there comes a time in just about everybody's life where they make a decision that will change the course of their future. I find it kind of funny how chasing one dream can sometimes lead you to another. For me, the year was 2005, and I was a 24-year-old sergeant in the United States Army serving as the crew chief for the most advanced attack helicopter on the planet, the Longbow Apache. Imagine 17,000 pounds of alloy and oil breathing fire at 145 miles per hour, what I like to call mechanical dragons. If you happen to be a citizen soldier with boots on the ground downrange, there was no greater feeling than having that beast thundering above the best. $35 million of unrelenting destruction at the hands of the most tactically proficient pilots on the planet, trained to efficiently and effectively find and kill the enemy day or night. So if you unfortunately found your unit in the hornet's nest and in need of support, danger close, the air cav were your guardian angels. Now, with a cost of roughly $1 million per flight hour, it takes a lot of technical proficiency to keep the dragons on the hunt. And that's where I came in. Every year, I'd spend thousands of hours crawling over every inch of those aircraft. And as a crew chief, your life is on the flight line and everything you do in support of keeping those Apaches flying, because the more they fly, the more of our troops come home alive. Now, during a deployment, you have 1,000 things to check daily, and you run long, you run hard, and you run hot. You have to work in the dirt during the rain, snow, and 100-degree heat, not to mention dodging the occasional incoming enemy fire with no room for error. One thing you learn in aviation maintenance is that no matter how well you're built, with enough time and sustained pressure, everything has a breaking point. And one of the worst things that can happen to a crew chief is losing an aircraft. So back in 2005, Kandahar, Afghanistan, one particular morning, I'm performing a 100-hour swash plate rotation on an aircraft 101. Everything checked out okay, so I put it back together, signed off the paperwork, and prepped it for flight. A few hours later, a fellow crew chief ran up to let me know that 101 had crashed hard. Immediately, my mind started racing. I mentally ran through every step of the inspection and the launching of the aircraft. And I stopped what I was doing and grabbed 100% accountability of all my tools. Now, within the hour, the pilots were evac'd back to the base via Black Hawk. They were a little banged up, but okay for the most part. That night, the downed aircraft recovery team returned with 101 on a flatbed truck. The first thing you noticed was that the tail boom had been completely torn off. The landing gear had buckled to help slow the impact, and it was leaking fluids. The aircraft landed so hard that the canopy had actually partially separated from the fuselage. It was a sad sight. Such a magnificent creature lying there in 1,000 pieces. The remains were being stored in a special hangar, pending the investigation. You better believe that with a piece of equipment that expensive gets destroyed, you know that the top brass want to know every detail that led to that incident. Once a week, I'd rotate in on guard duty and watch the aircraft for an 8-hour shift to make sure no one disturbed what remained for the duration of the investigation. That's a lot of time to sit and try to figure out what it was that you're looking at. Like a coroner, combing through the remains, trying to identify the parts of what used to be one of your mechanical dragons. So for 45 days, I didn't know if I was responsible for that crash. That stress just about destroyed me. You see, I still had to work long, stressful hours to keep the remaining aircraft flying missions. And at that point, I was a mess, constantly doubting myself and rechecking everything I did just in case. So you can imagine my relief being cleared after investigation ruled that the cause of the crash was pilot error and stated that the aircraft was operating normally when it hit the ground. I wish at that time that I could have picked up my toolbox and carried on business as usual, but something inside me had broken beyond repair. And that was the day that I made a decision that would change the course of my life. I turned down a generous tax-free enlistment bonus, and a year later, I was out of the Army and back in California. But after the Army, I took up my love for theater and photography and pursued a safer and slightly less stressful career in film. 10 years later, I started my own production company and couldn't think of a better name than Mechanical Dragons. My first military documentary project would be a thrilling war film called Apache Warrior, about my squadron during the invasion of Iraq in 2003. It's available on Amazon if you're interested. But I had originally wanted to make a film about being a crew chief. Unfortunately, turning wrenches is just not that exciting. So for my next documentary project, it would not just be any old aviation mechanic, but actually about the very first mechanician, the granddaddy of all aircraft mechanics. Hopefully it'll be able to give you a little bit of an idea of what it's like to be a part of this rich culture. See, I keep this remove before flight tag on my keychain as a reminder over the years that I spent in aviation maintenance. I still have a lot of respect for the craft, and I always will feel connected to the rich history of aerospace. So the next time you're taking a flight for business or pleasure, you're sitting on the tarmac preparing to take off, please take a moment and think of the mechanics working hard all night to make sure your aircraft gets to your destination safely. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you, Joshua. Yeah, don't stop the love and support that's happening in the chat box. How are y'all feeling out there? What parts of these stories you're connecting with? Like in Joshua's story, we had that idea of self-doubt, the idea, the feeling of being broken, the idea of a huge life change. What parts do you connect with? Hit that, put that in the chat. Share. All right. Our next monologist is a Navy Academy graduate who went on to serve as an intelligence officer in the U.S. Navy. Please welcome Robert Buckholtz.
Trigger warning, there are some difficult discussion here. There is some difficult discussion here about sexual assault. Sit down, shut your mouth, and don't say a word. For many years, that was my mantra. It's quite fitting that a 15-year-old kid with a closely guarded secret would grow up to become an intelligence officer. We go through great lengths to safeguard our secrets, ensuring that only the right people have access to certain information. Orange covered sheets always caught my eye as it contained hard copies of top secret material, where its unauthorized disclosure could cause exceptionally grave damage. There are ways to declassify this information, but as you can imagine, the review process is quite long. That kid never shared his secret. And for the next 20 years, he would go on to graduate from college, become an officer, get married, and have 3 children. Life has been and always will be good. I deployed to Iraq in January 2019. At home, our culture was changing, but our intel shop was busy with more pressing and relevant matters. But as I passively followed the seemingly endless flow of sexual assault allegations on the news, I recalled an incident in college where I helped a drunk girl stumble back to her dorm. She became very aggressive, and I'm paraphrasing here, but she said that if I left, she would claim rape. She even blocked the door, and I had to shove myself in between her and the wall just so I could escape. Nothing significant came of it, yet I felt uncomfortable. The worst part was how this incident forced me to the edge of my suppressed secret. The one that could cause me exceptionally grave damage. For nearly 20 years, sit down, shut up, and don't say a word, suppressed it. And it was tearing me apart. But I didn't have time for distractions like that. I was in Iraq, so I hid in plain sight and got shit done. I returned from Iraq in October 2019, but before I did, on the rooftop of one of Saddam's structures that we now occupied, I made a list of names and dates, rolled it, set it on fire, and lit my cigar with it. As I scanned the night sky for drones, birds, or nothing at all, I took the time to acknowledge my past and accept the present. I remain professional, I'm alive, married to an awesome woman, and would soon be bear hugging my amazing children. Life has been and always will be good. 2020 was when the walls broke. In a heated argument with my wife, I realized that I was talking around my secret. The lack of context was creating unnecessary hostility. For years, I had leaked bits of info, but I just kept saying, sit down, shut up, and don't say a word. Declassification was not on the table, but I'm looking into my wife's eyes. I need to sit down, shut up, and don't say a word. I see her fear. I feel my fear. She needs to know. Sit down, shut up, don't say a word. I need to do this. I silently composed myself and read her in. Summer 2001. At 15, I was very aware of the things that I could and could not do, as well as the implications of the stuff I explored, especially if I wanted to join the military. And with the internet at my fingertips, anything was attainable. I found chat rooms with like-minded people, usually twice my age, where I met some in person, but never for a second time. My third meetup was going as planned until it was no longer fun. I need a break, and stop was not respected, so I resisted. And then he struck me in the back of the head. On the outside, I froze, but on the inside, I understood my new situation. Survival. I complied. When he finished, I acted like nothing was wrong. I even said I had a good time because I didn't want to give him a reason. And I walked away. Researching sexual assault left me feeling isolated because it never mentioned males as the victim. And the implications of coming forward meant unwanted attention and the possibility of not being able to join the military. Sit down, shut up, and don't say a word was born. I ceased this curiosity, covered the tracks, and supplemented the memories with school, soccer, girlfriends, and alcohol. And eventually became an officer. My wife, she was the first person that I ever confided in. There's no sigh of relief. No weight was lifted off my shoulders. I did it out of necessity. I don't feel broken. I just needed my wife to see where I was coming from. I needed to be understood. She saw and she understood. In a world of secrets, unchecked biases, and great expectations, many men believe that they are just expected to take it and are unwilling to come forward. And that list I made in Iraq, 7 additional instances of assault. Sit down, shut up, and don't say a word saved me. I would not change my past because of the family that I have today, but I don't teach my kids my mantra. I emphasize owning our mistakes and learning from them. But more importantly, I reassure them that this is a loving home where there are no secrets, where we are open and honest with ourselves and each other. It's declassified now. I no longer have control over this secret. As for your secrets, you decide what's best for you. Just know that it's okay that life hasn't been and will not always be good. Own it, learn, and move on. There's a lot of good things ahead. Thank you.
Robert, thank you. Thank you. Amazing story. Let's give him some love and support in the chat box there. Also, if you are feeling some sort of way, if it brought up some things that you need to process, at the end of this, we are going to have a list of organizations to help you that have been curated by Dr. Scharff. So we will have that list at the end. Thank you, Robert, for sharing that. Our 5th monologue comes from Nova Reyer, an Arabic crypto veteran of the U.S. Army during Operation Enduring Freedom.
13 years ago, as an Arabic linguist deep in the devious world of military intelligence and national security, I embarked upon a quest to a cute little regional art festival where I found this handcrafted cat head doll. Or maybe he found me, catching my eye with his painted on face, like mine at the time, gray-green irises, and a wide smile with sharp teeth, just like mine. He lets out a dry, scratchy sound when handled, and his smooth waxed paper has begun to crack and curl with age, a bit like mine lately. Well, the artist had a definite Halloween vibe, and the object itself seemed intended as some kind of spooky little decoration. But for me, he's served as my stowaway travel companion. On 2010, on the day I met my new team on my second deployment to Afghanistan, the cat listened unhelpfully as I sheepishly explained to my new OIC, officer in charge for our civilian guests, that my M9 ammo pouch must have fallen off on the transport plane because it sure as shit was not on my belt. Not a great look for their new staff sergeant. We got through that embarrassment and would later gain infamy for taking a dare and parading through a nearby base with a bright yellow banana in our thigh holster. Twice. Despite his hijinks, we were honorably discharged from the Army in 2013 and moved to the dreaming spires of Oxford for grad school. From there, it was on to sunny California to pursue our misguided capitalistic dreams with a tech startup. This is when I got my first tattoo, and the cat joined me for good. It's an exact 2-scale replica of my little buddy in front of an 8-pointed star. The tattoo represents a specific period of my life. Over 8 years in the Army and the first stages of finding myself after I got out. And the star, with a point for every year in service, represents new beginnings and the adventures to follow. You may have noticed the cat and my first tattoo are both gendered male, as I was back then. My second tattoo conjures a protective female energy that I discovered during a 3-week psychic deep dive in a Buddhist temple in Thailand. And my latest portrays a mysterious literary creature who represents my non-binary nature, which has more recently asserted itself in full glorious force. The cat is more than a spooky doll or a pretty tattoo. He's a messenger from the time I wore a uniform, who reminds me who I became over those years, of skills and capabilities I developed that I put to use now for social justice and mutual aid work, of a toxic masculine mess I let seep into me that took years to deprogram, of my development as a leader focused on mentorship and the well-being of my soldiers. He reminds me of the amazing people I served with, buddies I let down, and a few missions I wish I'd never been a part of. He reminds me that I chose another, harder path when I left the service. My cat is a much-needed daily reminder that I can choose who I am and what I do with my life, that I can live with green eyes full of love and mischief and teeth sharpened by curiosity and determination. But I'm a prankster at heart, and we're at our best when we're serving others. So basically, he tells me to be me, whoever that might be. Thank you.
Our next set of cultural identity monologues have been pre-recorded. So our first video is from a former aviation electrician's mate, 3rd class, who served during the Vietnam War. Please enjoy the monologue from U.S. Navy veteran Randall Barnett.
Best dressed. How did I earn the stage manager's Best Dressed Award for the play Mr. Roberts as performed at the Coronado Playhouse, considering that we were all in naval uniforms? For those of you not in the know, dungarees were the uniform of the day for enlisted sailors. Sailors confined on board a decrepit old cargo ship relegated to the backwaters of the Pacific during World War II. So, if it wasn't my dungarees, how did I earn that award? Act 1, Scene 2 opens with the actor playing Insignia and me playing Mannion as we take opposite sides of the stage, each of us supposedly swabbing the decks. Oh, the joy. But I was slacking. Having just come off a duty watch, I still had my binoculars, and I was scanning the recently built hospital on the island near where our ship was anchored. Oh, and much to my pleasure, and much to my sweet, oh, such sweet pleasure, the hospital was now staffed with nurses, lots of nurses, with no curtains on their windows. Heaven on earth! Well, it was for me. But Insignia was not happy that I would not share my binoculars with him. Crossing the stage, as we hurl our next 4 lines at each other, we go to war. Just so you know, we fully planned and rehearsed our fight scene over and over and over. We were both in great shape, so we found a way and worked a way to make each hit, kick, lunge, even our grappling, look and sound realistic. So much so that night after night, as our scene opened, with the audience laughing both with and for us at our shenanigans, and then suddenly the audience would pull back, inhaling deeply as one, sucking all the air off the stage. The silence in that theater during our fight was deafening. During our fight, we really shred our dungarees. Did that help me get the award? Yeah, in part. The other actors, even knowing and watching us rehearse our fight, night after night, hesitated to separate us because they were afraid that we were really fighting. Oh, did Insignia and I revel in that. We both enjoyed the high that you get as a performer when you know you've done it and done it right. At the end of Act 1, Mr. Roberts has secured liberty for all of us. Liberty, oh, liberty, sweet liberty. In this scene, we're all in our berthing quarters, changing into our dress white uniforms. I am stripping down from my dungarees into my boxers, right in front of the entire stage. And I'm the only one taking it that far. Yes, this did contribute in part to my earning the Best Dressed award. You see, a running joke with the cast and crew was, if you had something risque that needed to get done, give it to Randy, me, because he'll do it, as they said. Oh, not only did I do it, but I fully owned it and loved it, as did the women in the audience, as many would tell me in the after-show meet and greet. Starting with Act 2, we sailors are returning back to the ship from a drunken, raucous night of liberty. The once warring Insignia and I, now best friends, are drunkenly propping each other up as we attempt to board our ship. Insignia appears to have been in a fight because his once dress whites are not dress white. In fact, he has several bruises, but not by me. As for me, my dress whites, they are nowhere to be seen. As for me, I returned to the ship in nothing but a grass skirt. Yes, a grass skirt. So now you know how I earned the stage manager's Best Dressed award.
Awesome reveal. Exactly. Best dressed. Oh, fantastic, Randall. Thank you so much. Anyone else out there dressed really nicely tonight? Very nice. Excellent. Thank you for giving love and support in the chat box. Our next video comes from Bodhi Rader, who served as a flight commander in both the Air Force and the Air Force Reserve.
Make sure you get good grades, they said. College is key to getting a good paying job, they said. Be respectful, follow the rules, do it this way, they said. Don't be a musician like me, he said. Regret. The dutiful son obeyed, succeeded, and never knew a part of me was cut off, a part I never met, noticing an emptiness, feeling no purpose, dwelling in depression and death. Regret. Then the question erupted, a path already cracking. If, on your deathbed, you looked back on life, would you have any regrets? So I began my search, an introvert's journey inward, relying on the writings of others, knowing there must be more, failing to find a passion, but succeeding in realizing permission. This permission to live, to leave a traditional job, to allow creativity back in. While so many quotes, coaching words held influence, this speech the only one that lit a flame for me to create, to design this object, to print it, to frame it, to hang it where I can see it, to memorialize it in greater impact than others. The object is a physicalization of an idea. It is rectangular, a size of my choosing. The frame is black to represent its seriousness. It is plastic, frail, perhaps not quite worthy of its meaning. But it serves its purpose to be able to see the object, to protect it. The background is deep, red, emotional, reminiscent of fear and the unknown, nightmare color. The image is of a pattern of life, those watching, not doing, those that just exist, heckle and return, not truly living. The object has no smell, but the arena smells of dust and sweat and heat, feels warm and oppressive, but with a breeze of hope, an opening only the warrior can sense. The words serve as a lighthouse, a reminder that finding another way is not wrong. A warrior, motivated by an idea, power in his eyes, facing down uncertainty, never losing, just learning. In an arena built of shackling the rules, made of trusting in what senses to be right. Fighting alone, but surrounded by faint remaining footsteps that provide companionship. Gifted with scars, experiences, and memories that can never be stolen. Facing a battle that takes what you give up to teach you that it was never needed. It has led to a life that is a total surprise. New opportunities, joys, presenting themselves where I never thought they lived. Reigniting a once dying flame. The battle of finances and expectations rages on. The doubt of norms, and the fear of disappointing upbringing. Temptress of golden handcuffs ring loud. Yet the object connects me to the courageous potential within. This personal creation, inspired by the mystery of why these words were spoken, makes me feel grounded. Reminds me that this is a valid path, that life can and will conspire to help me. Knowing that doing what others don't is not failure, but rather a rise from the ash of my former self.
Thank you so much, Bodhi, for sharing that video with you. Give him some love in the chat box. Fantastic. Chat box is blowing up. Great production skills. Yes. Wonderful. Well, let's just keep on rolling. Our third video is from one of our facilitators. Dr. Constance Scharff, Ph.D., is our mental health expert who worked with us throughout our journeys this summer and is the founder of the Institute for Contemporary and Indigenous Mental Health Research.
In late November 1991, I stared out the window of a tour bus in Rajasthan, India. I was on a semester abroad program with 17 other students, but that day I sat alone, thinking. I had been involved in an incident. I confronted and insulted a very important man. The event had reverberated all the way to the highest levels of government in Delhi, and I was facing potential expulsion from my university. 10 days earlier, I watched the proceedings of a tribal court in rural Gujarat. A local guru, an important man with a reputation for fairness, created a court over which he presided to help put an end to the blood feuds between families that started over small issues and lasted for years. In the last case of the day, a woman about my age, 19, petitioned for divorce. In drunken rages, her husband was regularly beating her near to death. Everyone was in agreement that a divorce should be granted until the last minute, when the husband asks for another chance to prove himself a capable husband and not to drink again. In a decision that stunned me. The guru told the wife's father that he could buy her freedom for $100. As he was unable to afford the fee, I offered to pay. I had $500 cash with me. The guru explained that he named a fee beyond what the family could pay to give the father a face-saving way to return his daughter to her husband. I didn't care. $100 was a pittance for her safety. Angrily, the guru said that he would simply raise the price beyond what even I could pay. The matter was closed. Outraged, I told him off and left the compound. I was tracked by some of his followers who followed me with spears to murder me. The guru sent someone to rescue me, and I had been rushed back to Ahmedabad for my safety. 10 days later, all was different. I was touring Rajasthan, living like a queen. I spent the days since leaving Gujarat living in castles, riding elephants, and shopping, a far cry from the lives of the poor in Gujarat. Our professor was very ill and had returned to Delhi, taking most of our luggage so we could enjoy our tour unencumbered. Yet despite the luxury and beauty of Rajasthan, my thoughts remained in Gujarat. The bus pulled over and I got off to stretch my legs. 5 yards or so down the road, 2 women squatted before 2 tapestries set out carefully in the dust. The woman closest to me reminded me of the young woman I had tried to help in Gujarat. They shared a determined strength in their eyes. I found their fortitude compelling. Courage is a gift. I looked at the tapestries. The second was amateurish, but the first was special. How much do you want for it? I asked. $200, the woman replied. My heart sank as I remembered that our professor had our luggage. I had only the money in my pocket. I don't have that much, I replied, and began to return to the bus. Wait, the woman demanded. She pushed the toddler clutching her toward me. The child was filthy, with thick mucus streaming from her nose and crusty discharge in the inner corner of each eye. How much will you pay? The children need food. I knew that the tapestry was worth more than what she asked. I only have $40, I said, continuing back to the bus. $150, the woman countered. I stopped and turned back toward her. I only have $40. I pulled the money from my pocket. The woman looked at me suspiciously. You must pay more. I shook my head. I felt guilty, sick, that tomorrow afternoon, when we arrived in Delhi, I would have access to several $100s, but I did not have it now. The driver started the bus. The woman glowered at me. You're cheating me, but I will take $40. In a way, I was cheating her. I felt ashamed as I handed her the money. I gave her literally every penny I had. Her children would eat, but the artist was not fairly compensated for her work. She knew it, and I knew it. Yet purchasing the item seemed the best course of action. The Rajasthani tapestry remains one of the most beautiful pieces in my collection. It hangs above the fireplace in my house and is commented on by almost everyone who comes into my home. I keep the piece in the center of my home not only because it is beautiful, but because of what it reminds me. It reminds me that around the world women suffer. A woman's life may be deemed less valuable than a tapestry laid out in the dirt. It also reminds me that with or without money, I am not always successful at helping those I encounter, but I still do what I can, even when those efforts are not enough.
Excellent. Thank you. Give some love to Dr. Constance in the chat box. Such an invaluable help to us. And I don't want to speak for the veterans, but they can speak later to how great she was being a part of this workshop. Our final pre-recorded video this evening is from someone who you heard from earlier, our other Geffen Playhouse teaching artist, BJ Lange, who is currently on assignment at the Department of Defense Warrior Games, which you can watch right now on ESPN. BJ is a medically retired U.S. Air Force Reserve medic.
If you had told me 25 years ago I'd be here, I wouldn't have believed it. How something so simple, a ticket, a piece of printed cardstock, could validate a lifetime of hustle. How the perforated edges could tear away the burden of striving to fit in where I didn't belong. How the creators of this show could so perfectly parallel my own life through the relatable satire of an awkward teenage boy trying to change the world, trying to change his own world against mounting insecurities. So similar to a certain theater and band kid in Missouri searching for his own ticket to life. It's tough to grow up lower middle class, though I wouldn't have known the difference back then. At the beginning, my beginning, we were definitely below the middle. At one point, my high school lost its accreditation from the state, and most everyone I knew at least had free lunch. So the idea of being on stage, much less seeing a big show in or even visiting Hollywood? Are you kidding me? Inconceivable. You see, I grew up in North St. Louis, or more specifically North County, on the edge of the city of St. Louis. I was a tall, lanky white boy at a predominantly black high school. I stood out and tried to carve a niche for myself as the class clown. Beatboxing during lunch, being silly in the hallways, and cracking jokes were crucial to my identity. I dreamed of acting all the time, but couldn't actually fathom anything outside of North St. Louis, and if I did, I would have been laughed at. Even in the school productions, the imposter syndrome was mounting. Here, different from most of my classmates in skin tone, innate privilege, and lived experience, yet the disadvantage of a substandard school district made us all vulnerable to diminished dreams. Different from everyone around us physically, and yet exactly the same. Acting was my highway, but comedy was the exit. I was a goofball, voted junior and senior year class clown, hamming it up just to cover the fact that I desperately wanted to fit in to a culture that wasn't mine. Really, to be accepted. I wanted to use my talent somehow to make people experience something, and laughter was at the top of that list. I dreamed of something bigger for my life, something no one around me would really understand. Theater and the stage became a means of channeling that humorous energy into something productive, and then expounded into a dream. It's just a ticket stub. Nothing special, or so I wouldn't have thought. Hundreds of them are probably floating around the Hollywood curbs, littering the sewage drains, discarded trash from the unbalanced mix of down-home tourists and the bourgeois annual patrons who sit in those red velvet Pantages chairs every weekend and get cultured. A world away from the Riverview Gardens middle and high school cafetoriums that I thought were the top of the earth. Back then, the only thing better than being in the school show was being served at lunch. Sundance and cheese. But one man's trash can be another man's treasure, right? For me, and those like me, a ticket means access. And access to the arts is everything. It's permission to heal. It's a safe space to reflect, to acknowledge, to learn. To an artist, it's inspiration and research and community. But to a layperson, it's simply entertainment. To a young goofy kid who secretly dreams of his acting and comedy career, it's seeing yourself in the future. But you have to give yourself permission. I know now, after years of teaching improv to these vulnerable groups, that having the resources to see and experience theater can change one's life. It certainly has changed mine. Over time, I moved out of Glasgow Village, studied acting and comedy, booked some awesome gigs, and tried to listen less to that self-doubt and mounting imposter syndrome. Eventually, I made it here, my friend's garage. Just kidding, Los Angeles. On stage, sets, and in audiences across the city, I continue to find my tribe. The dreamers, the group of misfits, the underdogs, the humble and the hardworking. I'm fortunate to be able to convene time and time again to watch a story unfold and find myself in it. Well, I keep this ticket as one such memory. A memory of seeing my first Broadway show since moving to Los Angeles, The Book of Mormon at the Pantages Theater in 2012. I had seen plenty of Broadway shows before, but not like this. Theater, a musical, the satire, the music. This show blew my mind, and so much so that I have 3 other tickets just like it for the exact same show. Different dates, of course, and well, the seats got better. But this first ticket, it really meant something. This show had everything I could ever want in a show. I got a jolt, This show served as both an inspiration and as a reminder, to remind me of the excitement I felt at the possibility of even wanting to get up on stage back in Missouri. To remind me that no matter what the voices told me back then, I belong here. How fortunate I am to be here, waking up every day to the fulfillment of an idea. A ticket says, here's what's to come and what has been. This ticket is more than just access to a seat in a room with a stage. It's access to follow and sometimes watch your dreams. A ticket says, welcome, you belong here. Hey, you hear that, young BJ? You belong here. You belong.
Excellent. Although he's not here, please give BJ some love in the chat box. Thanks for sharing, BJ. And thank you on behalf of the Geffen Playhouse education team for being here with your fellow veterans. As he is out right now at the Warrior Games, he made me promise to say, go Team Air Force. Sorry, he made me say that or he wouldn't come back. So, had to say it. Good. Thank you for all that love and support. I'm now going to kick it back over to Sean Michael to introduce our next presenter.
Oh, wow. Great work on all those videos. Sometimes videos can be static, but those were so incredible and engaging. Like even the fact that I knew BJ was in short pants didn't make his less impactful. It just great videos. Next up, we have our final three are going to be live again. We let's just talk for a second. Let's talk about our loved ones who like shape who we are and how we see the world. Our loved ones become part of us and allow them to take them with us everywhere we go. Memories are the building blocks of our personality. Experiences from childhood and adolescence and even memories from yesterday inform our present and the way we interpret it. Our final set of cultural identity monologues, we will begin with Lugdy, I'm so sorry, Lugdy Cueva, who served as an officer in the U.S. Army.
Wah, 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 wah. Wah, 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 wah. Wah, 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 wah. This is what I heard as a first and second grader when my teacher spoke. Even though the children in Charlie Brown understood the teacher, the audience did not, and nor did I. I was born in Los Angeles, California, of Latin American parents. My mother's from Colombia and my father's from Mexico. My first language was Spanish because this was the predominant language spoken in our home when I was growing up. I remember in class that I did not understand what the teacher said, so I was a very shy child and never asked any questions from about first grade to about the first half of second grade. After school, we watched a lot of TV and cartoons such as Looney Tunes and Sesame Street, where little by little we learned some English. At that time, there were no ESL programs to transition Spanish-speaking children to English, so we were often left on our own accord to learn, which was a huge struggle. Also, learning without being able to speak the language made things very, very difficult. For instance, math. Math was always a difficult subject. My grandmother taught my sister and I the timetables in Spanish at a very early age. So when we got to school and had to do math, I always dreaded to go to the chalkboard in front of the entire class because I was the slowest mathematician in the room. I did not know my timetables in English, so I had to translate the timetables from Spanish to English and English to Spanish to come up with the correct answer. And this process would always take me twice as long to get the right answer than anyone else. But no one in my class ever knew. In school, teachers always expected parents to help their children with homework, and at the time offered no other help. Both of my parents had to work to make ends meet, so by the time they got home, they were either too exhausted or they just did not understand how to help us out. The few times my mother and father were able to help us with our homework was doing long division, but they taught us to do it the European Latin American way. So I always got in trouble with the teacher and received low grades on my math tests because the teacher could not follow how I got to the right answer and only accepted the English way of doing long division. So my learning struggle continued. There was a moment in the second half of second grade where a light bulb literally was turned on in my head. Throughout first grade and the first half of second grade, I did not understand my teacher. But the mind of a child is an incredible thing. So by the second half of second grade, I went to sleep one night, not understanding English, and the next morning, I understood the English language and finally my teacher. I'm not sure how I passed the first grade without ever understanding anything. But these were the days when a child with learning difficulties was simply ignored. When I got to third grade, I was given a standardized test. And because I was just starting to understand things in English, I simply filled out random circles throughout the test. Of course I failed miserably. I remember that my teacher, not fully understanding that I still did not have a mastery of the English language, and that's why I did not score well, told my mother that due to my test results, I was a below average student. That day I was devastated and I cried myself to sleep. My mother was very wise and told me the following: "You are smart. If you study and work hard, you will succeed. And no one can ever take your education away from you." I knew deep inside that I was a very intelligent little girl. I just had to prove it to the world. That day, I vowed to show my teacher and my classmates that I was the smartest kid in the room. From that day forth, I studied hard. I studied during recess and when I got home until I fell asleep. From about the third grade to the 8th grade, I became a straight A student. As a result, when I graduated from 8th grade, I was the Taylor Swift of my graduating class. I won all the academic awards that year and even beat out the smartest girl in my class. A moment of victory. Living in between two worlds, I was also faced with additional challenges besides learning. For instance, my mother often needed us to help her with resolving bills, going to the doctor, and going shopping. So I often had to translate for her from Spanish to English and English to Spanish to resolve any matters she was dealing with. My mother or the other party we were speaking to would at times get upset when trying to resolve a matter. So I learned from a very early age to make sure that I mitigated emotions on both sides so that I could resolve the situation without anyone getting upset. A skill set I still use to this day. School and growing up with my first language being Spanish was difficult, but in the end, it was a blessing in disguise. As a result of my experiences growing up, I became an effective communicator, translator, and negotiator in both English and Spanish. Practice does make perfect. I am able to diffuse any situation that comes my way in both languages. And I became an empathetic and excellent teacher because my experience taught me that children learn in different ways. They need patience, support, and creative solutions to learn. I would like to tell all the American little girls and boys whose first language is Spanish and struggle with education. Si estudias y trabajas duro, todo es posible. Nunca te rindas. Translated, if you study and work hard, anything is possible. Never give up. Thank you.
Thank you, Lugdy. That was amazing. All of these are so amazing, and I've heard them all before, and they still still hit me. Thank you all for sharing these. Let's give some love and support in the chat. You guys that are presenting, please go back and read the chat. You're getting some amazing love here and some support. Our penultimate monologue comes from a retired United States Air Force flight nurse and UCLA clinical professor. She served during the Cold War, Operation Desert Shield, and Desert Storm. Here is Maggie Dewan-Smith.
Pop served in the Army in World War II in Germany. Later, he was an attorney with the war crimes trials in Germany and Austria. Mom was Hungarian, escaping to Austria in 1945. They met in a USO club in Salzburg and got married. I was raised in suburban Cincinnati, which was very much like Lake Wobegon. At night, doors, cars were left unlocked, windows were left open. And when I was 6 years old, I remember walking to kindergarten with a neighbor kid about 3/4 of a mile, unsupervised, across busy intersections. Neighborhood families knew each other. They watched out for each other. The adults would step in as needed. My mother had chronic heart problems and was supposed to be avoiding undue stress, which the neighbors knew about. So when they were watching me, I learned to pretty much do what was expected of me, or at least try not to get caught. The nuns at school were also aware of restrictions on my mother, so they encouraged me to get involved in after-school activities. I started playing the cello club, joined clubs, and got into dramatics. And that's when I became a bookworm. I read every chance I could get. I would go to the library with my father after dinner, and we would find something wonderful. I read the Nancy Drew series, the Cherry Ames series, Sherlock Holmes, Dickens, Edgar Allan Poe, the novels of the day. I read in the evening, and then I would read at night under the covers with a flashlight. I would hear the parents coming up the stairs because the stairs creaked, and I would stow the flashlight and the book under my pillow, hopefully not to get caught. In the 4th grade, my reading tested at a college level. I was invited to join the school's annual spelling competition, which was usually restricted to 6th to 8th graders. But thanks to those reading habits, I had an extensive vocabulary, pardon me, earned A's in spelling, and I won the spelling bee. Now, I wasn't aware of what the prize was until I was presented with this ceramic statue of a praying Madonna, dressed in blue, looking so pious. But what was really astonishing or jarring about this was that there was a hole in the back of her head. This religious icon was also a vase. I remember being shocked and confused. Was this really a prize that I'd won? I valued what it meant, but I did not appreciate the significance until years later. I finished high school, grade school, high school. Graduation was truly a commencement, beginning adulthood. About a month after my high school graduation, my mother had a cardiac arrest and died after 10 days. One of my best friends from grade school, Sheila Mary, became my rock. She provided structure and strength in my life. We started college together. We'd eat, drink, study together, and I leaned on her. She guided me figuratively and literally through the year. After that first school year, Sheila sat me down and said, maybe it's time for me not to live just on the outskirts of life, but to join in again. And that made sense. But in a cruel, very cruel world twist of fate, Sheila was lost in a car accident about a month after that. I Could not focus. I was numb. I was raging. I was crying. I was grieving. I didn't believe it. I couldn't concentrate. My life in Cincinnati became stifling. I dropped out of school. I escaped to New York looking for a new life. I had the statue with me, and years later, I brought it to Los Angeles. This statue initially signified faith, but over time, it's come to mean more. It's gratitude for everyone who shared and still shares their experience and their strength with me, teaching me compassion and tolerance and patience. I have learned that we all have our private sorrows. I'm more accepting, and I have empathy. I work on being positive, encouraging, and understanding. I respect our individual paths, but I do look for commonalities that create bonds, like serving in the military. We all raised our right hand. When I think of the cultural forces affecting me through the years, and I look at this statue, I know that while this wasn't the script that I wrote for my life, I'm very grateful for the way it's turning out. I took the ball and I ran with it. Who'd have thunk it? Me, sitting here, sharing with all of you. I couldn't have imagined it. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Amazing. Thank you. Let's give her some love and support in the chat box there. Maggie, please read those comments. They're amazing. Our final monologue comes from Dave Lara, who served in Vietnam as a corpsman in the U.S. Navy.
I'm Dave Lara. I needed to join the military. I was failing in high school, and there were problems in my family. It was 1965, and there was a draft, and I thought, I'll join the Navy so I won't have to go to combat. Vietnam was just ramping up. One problem. Entering boot camp, I was a criminal. It was illegal for me to exist. I was a degenerate, and I was mentally ill. I'm gay. And in that time, laws against my existence had penalties that included prison. There were witches looking for me and my kind. And if I were found out, a dishonorable discharge in federal prison awaited me. But I made it through boot camp, and I succeeded in ways that I didn't even know I could. I went to hospital corps school to become sort of a nurse, not quite a doctor, and most definitely a bedpan washer. And despite my best laid plans, I ended up in Vietnam a year after joining. My orders were for the USS Repose, a hospital ship just off the coast of Vietnam. It took wounded directly from the battlefield. I had to wait a couple of weeks as it was on its way back from the Philippines, where it had gone for replenishment. So for 12 days, I was assigned to an aid station at Dong Han near the DMZ. Two corpsmen, Matt and Joe, attached to me and got me up to speed on my temporary duties. Joe and Matt happened to be gay. And at that point, I learned that we are everywhere. Even those early days, there existed gaydar. It usually starts off with a question, do you have a girlfriend? Matt, he was a short, stocky, blonde, cute little fucker. And he was strong and battle-hardened. I fell in love with him. In war, you become friends fast. As I left to join the ship, we agreed to meet again somehow. As I've said, we are everywhere, and I soon made my acquaintance with 3 other friends of Dorothy's aboard the Repose. They were corpsmen like myself, and I told them about Matt and Joe, and they were anxious to meet them, and so we conspired to arrange that. The opportunity did come quickly. The Repose was scheduled to spend New Year's Eve in Hong Kong for R&R. Matt and Joe applied for out-of-country liberty and met us at the Hong Kong Hilton 2 days before 1967. There and then, we formed a tight gang of gay men, not as lovers, but as sisters in crime. It was then that we named ourselves The Group, based on a novel written by Mary McCarthy, a campy story about young women who meet at Vassar and follows their lives into adulthood, the principal theme being their problems with men, which of course we could relate to. Another tradition at the time had sailors buying Zippo lighters and having the name of their units, ship, or base etched on them. We had ours engraved with The Group. Our bond was sealed. The group managed to get together often, as it turned out. We made it to Singapore in the early part of 1967. Matt and I and the whole gang went for liberty to a place called Boogie Street. There, drag queens, transsexuals made up of Eurasians, Chinese, Filipinos, and Englishmen would cavort around tables and chairs, serving drinks and entertainment to the military men from all over the Pacific. It was an amazing night. And unexpectedly, Matt and I fell into each other's arms and stole a kiss. I was in heaven. This story is about the group. But understand this, we were experiencing the worst of war. Matt and Joe, every day at Dong Ha, were under extreme pressure. But even me aboard the Repose, if I saw 200 Marine and sailors dead, then I saw 201. At the end of 1967, my time was up aboard the Repose, and I once again joined Matt and Joe at Dong Ha, and I worked my last week before I left to go stateside. There was a battle, a big one, up at the DMZ in an area called Cantien. Matt and I got assigned to go pick up the wounded aboard 2 choppers. Joe was already up there working. Both our choppers landed, and we were loading. A rocket hit the one that Matt had come in on. He was standing at the door, and when it blew up, he was blown several feet. I ran to him. He looked at me with a pleading look. I sobbed and I told him, I wish we could have been lovers. I love you, Matt. I love you. Joe stood over us as other Marines had gathered around. No one cared that 2 men could love each other. Not here, not then. Then Matt died. I bent my head onto his chest, sobbing uncontrollably. David, come on, you gotta go, Joe pleaded. I'll take care of him, he screamed, tears streaming down his grimy face. He pointed to the chopper I came in on, its rotor blades spinning like hell. And if I didn't lift off quick, it would get blown away too. Joe grabbed my chin and he forced me to look at him. You've been here long enough. You know how this works. And then he whispered, the friendship's over. Go now. I frantically searched in Matt's pocket and found the lighter, the Zippo with the group etched on it. In 1970, the witch caught up with me and I was given a less than honorable discharge for being a homosexual. That was at Quantico Marine Corps Base in Virginia. And as I left, I threw away my uniform, my medals, and everything that was military. I went to Arlington, where Matt is buried, and I swore to him that I would do something to change the world so that men like he and I would never have to go through what we had to go through. In 2010, I found a gay psychiatrist at the LAVA Medical Center who helped me get control of the PTSD that I had suffered my entire life. And in 2020, after 50 years, with his help, I received an honorable discharge from the United States Navy and the Department of Defense. Proudest day of my life. For his help, I gave him my Zippo and made him part of the group. This is Matt's Zippo, the one I took off of him when he died. And I keep it to remind me, oddly, of the best time of my life and of a man I once loved. I'm Dave Laura. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. You just take a breath. All right, amazing story. Thank you for taking us home with that that incredible share. Please turn your cameras back on if possible, and show our veterans, all of our presenters, a big final appreciation with claps or snaps. Do the wave, take it old school. I don't know how you do it, but let's just show them some love. So everybody turn your cameras back on. Show them some visual love. Keep giving the comments in the chat. Amazing. So if you're watching, put your thing on gallery so you can see all the faces, all the wonderful, beautiful faces. BJ's back with us. And I'm going to kick it back to Brian.
Thank you, Sean Michael. Thank you very much. And thank all of you. Before we close out tonight, I want to personally thank BJ Lange, Sean Michael, and Dr. Constance for all their patience, hard work, and talent over the last 10 plus weeks. Let's give them all some appreciation that they can hear and see. I want to thank the Geffen Playhouse, Gil Cates Jr., our executive director, the staff of Geffen Playhouse for all of their help and support, our advisory board and Geffen board members, including Holly Rice, our education advocate. I would also be amiss if I did not mention Geffen Playhouse's upcoming season. We open on September 13th with Matthew Lopez's The Inheritance, Part 1 and 2, a West Coast premiere. You can find out more information about The Inheritance at www.geffenplayhouse.org. Finally, Geffen Playhouse Education and Community would like to share with you this link to a PDF with a series of resources. Sean Michael, could you drop that in the chat box, please? If anybody listening to me needs some help, if you need some assistance, if you need someone to talk to, there is no shame in seeking them out. We are all here for each other, and we hope that you can find the strength within to reach out if needed. On behalf of Geffen Playhouse Education and Community Engagement, thank you all so much for supporting our veterans today. Let's give them one final round of applause. Can everybody undo your mute? And let them hear the actual applause.
Good job. Wonderful job.
Please tip your waitress.
The gang's all here, Maggie.
Oh my goodness. Hi, guys.
Hi. Loved your story. Loved everybody's story. Great job.
Not surprised Maggie has her own fan club.
Not surprising at all.
I have learned from every one of these people. Every single one.
Thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate you and your time. Have a great and safe rest of your weekend. And please, once again, check out geffenplayhouse.org for all our upcoming shows.
Brian, you are wonderful. Thank you for everything. All you guys.
Everybody. Great.
Seconded.
Bravo, 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 everyone.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon. BJ, get home safe.